A lot of you know me, I'm Debbie Olson, and I'm the coordinator for Youth at Crossroads, and teach school-based and court-ordered classes in Salida and BB throughout Chaffee County. So we wanted to just do a quick crash course in the teen brain, development of the teen brain, and some of the effects of substance use on the brain. And there will be a quiz at the end. So just a few facts. Sorry, you guys. It's hard for you to see this. Just the teen brain, in short, is an amazing organ. I mean, it really is. The more I research it, the more I just am in awe. It's larger than the adult brain. There's so many neural pathways that are being set up, and some will go away if they're not used, and others will hardwire, if you will. But the brain is bigger, and it decreases as that hardwiring takes place into adulthood. So there's, under construction really, in many ways. You all know a lot of teens, and you know that their brains are super flexible, super fast. They can figure out a problem that takes some of the rest of us adults much longer in many cases. So they're, just amazing brains. And it's the second fastest growing time next to infancy, which I didn't know until recently. So it's pretty amazing. There's a high value on reward and risk. Does anybody have a thought about why that might be? Why with the teen brain? It's not just to drive us crazy as parents. What is the evolutionary reason for that? Some of you guys would know.
Well, it would be so you can, teenagers like to take risks because we want to learn as much as we can and we want to get experience. Because our brains naturally realize that that's what we need in order to grow and develop as a person and become an adult.
Right, and move, well said, very well said. So to gain new experiences, you have this need to get out and meet new people and try new things and go new places, and much more than we do, I think, in general as adults. Because you have to go from being a child in your parents' home and under that protected environment to being an adult. So how do you get there? Well, you have to really crave new experiences, and that's what's going on, in short. But so it has its positive, but it can also have some negatives, if you will, about maybe making some bad decisions or some not so healthy decisions around that. The frontal lobe is still developing. We'll talk a little bit more about that, which is more the decision and reasoning portion of the brain, the higher level portion, if you will. And development continues until the age of 25, which is a pretty good long time. The amygdala, which is in the center of the brain, has a real heightened sensitivity at this point, and we all know this in the form of, a lot of kids are more emotional. And there's motivation, which they're highly motivated to do certain things and not other things. So that's the center of the brain that is involved with that. Okay. So just another crash course on brain science here. So the center part of the brain, just in general, is the limbic brain, or I like to call it the survival brain. It's your fight or flight brain, and it's composed of the basal ganglia, the amygdala, which we just talked about, the brain stem, which is involved with reflexes, vomiting, breathing, pain, the cerebellum, motor control, coordination, the hippocampus, memory, learning. So you can see those are some of the real survival functions of the brain. And in the center there, if a kid feels threatened or anybody feels threatened, that part of the brain lights up. And that's really the main thing that works at that point. If you feel threatened in any way, that's what's going to take over. The outer part, what we call the new brain or the neocortex, is the newer reasoning, more higher level thinking part of the brain. The brain is developing from back to front, basically, and it stands to reason. Again, from a survival standpoint, the survival parts have to develop first, right? The higher level thinking can kind of come later, but you have to live long enough to use them, right? So back to front. And the frontal lobe, of course, versus here, and that's why that's still developing in a developing brain. Again, just a review of what I just said in terms of the functions of the different parts of the brain: coordination, pain. This is also involved with reward, the limbic and the amygdala. Now that was a pretty quick overview, but we switched to how does marijuana affect the brain? And again, this is a quick overview, but there are many cannabinoid receptors in the limbic brain, in that center part of the brain that we talked about. And so much of the effect is in the lit up parts of the brain that you're seeing there, and some of the brainstem. There are also receptors in the cortex, but not quite as many. So there's a big effect on emotions, motivation, big on motivation, pain, and obviously why they use it with people in chronic pain or and such. Coordination, perception of time, all those things that are more survival based. The reason that THC works on the brain is because the brain recognizes it as a chemical that it knows, okay? And the chemical that it knows is called anandamide, and that's a receptor in the brain. What did you call it? It's called not the feel good. I want to say the feel good receptor, but it helps to. It's really cool because it helps to regulate emotion. Things that feelings and thoughts that typically, it helps to regulate those so that they stay within kind of a normal range. THC mimics that, but floods the brain with that same sense. So that's why it works, because the brain recognizes THC. If it was a completely foreign chemical or a foreign receptor that wasn't the same at all, it wouldn't have the same effect. We have a short video. Dr. Thurstone is a child psychiatrist at CU Denver, and he's really the expert, on this stuff right here, right now. He works with the governor on his, it's his advisor, and you can find out more about him by getting on his website. Just Google him.
Rebecca, I think the tab on the left might already have it open when I checked it. Let's see if it's up.
There you go. I'm going to take you
Lots of it's
One of the websites that comes from the state of Colorado on underage-driven alcohol use. It's a great resource, and we have some information on the resource table about this as well. Since we're not watching a video.
Just go back to the first. There you go. Go down now. There, speak now. Or the left one.
About a 2-minute video. The education video is not available. Well,
okay.
Speaknowcolorado.org, and we've got that written down outside. Go home and it's a great video.
Yes, he's got several others, and
Yeah,
he's
he's
small, but the beauty is that you can find it like that when you go home. But he just talks about again, kind of reiterating what I just talked about, the effects of marijuana and alcohol in the brain, and in the teen brain specifically, and the combination of the two is particularly dangerous. So, okay, so here's a study, and some of you may have heard of this study. It was done in New Zealand, and it's the longest study that has ever been done. And they took kids that were born in 1972, and periodically, as they came into teenhood, tested their IQ and their regularity of smoking pot or not. Okay, And they found that casual use of 2 times a week, I mean, I think most of us would say that was casual use, had an effect on IQ, as you can see there, 8 points, a drop between the ages of, well, up to the age of 38, was I think the last time they were tested. And, like 3% were on average gained a college degree, 37% of youth that never smoked gained a college degree. And they also did some memory and decision-making skills tests, and they saw diminished skills there. So that is, again, that's a study you can Google. It's really interesting. This was from Healthy Kids Colorado survey. It's done, I believe, every year, several years. And this was done last fall throughout Chaffee County. And some of the data that we pulled from that, almost 50% of students have used marijuana or alcohol and 20% prescription drugs. This is self-reported, anonymous survey, so we assume that it's fairly honest. And this is interesting. In the past 30 days, which is oftentimes what they measure, it's perceived alcohol use versus actual use. So the red is perceived, and the blue is actually what people are actually doing. So, and there is a preventative effect in people seeing this.
Perceived by who, Debbie?
Kids.
Of other kids.
Of other kids. So the thing, everybody's doing it. Well, everybody's not doing it. And, until you actually do a survey and get people's, what they're actually doing, you don't know. And they're going to be honest on these surveys because they're anonymous.
What do the numbers correspond with? 6?
That's
grade.
That's great.
Okay.
So this is all.
I was gonna say not age.
This is average, average throughout, and then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So perceived use is way higher than
It's
actual use.
twofold higher than 25.
Yeah. And I believe that's, let's see, and then down here, I don't know if you guys can read, 35% of juniors and seniors reported using marijuana in the last 30 days, 30% rode with marijuana and impaired drivers, and 20% with alcohol impaired drivers. So just a little baseline there. So we're going to talk more about this here in a minute, so I'll just briefly touch on the substance abuse prevention. Some things that we do, and education is one. We're here about the effects on the brain. The research that's coming out is new. I mean, it's within the last 10 years, and so this is new. It's new stuff, and also the effects and what is it that they're smoking? What is it that they're drinking? What is it? Practicing healthy options for stress reduction and relaxation. We do a lot of that in our classes. Just how do you relax besides doing drugs? What are some other ways? And kids sharing with other kids what they do that is helpful and healthy. And this is really important, delaying age of first use and decreasing the dosage. As long as they can hold out doing it or never do it, and the less you do, the better off you are. And then encouraging positive social interactions with people in the community, feeling like you're a part of something. That's super important. Some concerns that we will discuss at length tonight, I'm sure, are the edibles. They're, up until now, the potency unregulated and the labeling not consistent, and so it's highly dangerous for they market to kids. In many cases, I've realized that they can't sell to kids, and that's not. A lot of adults like chocolate and sweets also, but kids like those colorful candy, all that sort of thing. So if they see one, they might eat it. So I know we'll talk more about that. Potency is much higher today than it was, 20, 30 years ago. And legalization sends a message that it's safe to a lot of kids. Talk to a lot of kids that say, well, it's natural, it's legal, so it's okay. and then just our concerns about effects on the teen brain and further life outcomes. So those are all things that we'll discuss tonight. So
Great, so we're gonna, I'm gonna take a minute and introduce our panelists, and we'll jump into the questions. So, in no particular order of importance, because everyone has been willing to give their time and share their perspective and their particular area of expertise, we have Dr. Berkeley, to my left. Dr. Berkeley graduated from the University of Utah School of Medicine in 1994 and did a 3-year residency in family medicine at North Colorado Medical Center in Greeley. Has been practicing for 18 years doing full spectrum family medicine practice here in Salida. Thank you for that. And then Jody Nealon with Sol Vista Mental Health. Is that?
That's
right.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
With West Central Mental Health to most of us for the past few years. And Jody is a mental health clinician, over 6 years of experience working with children, adults, and families. And she's been with Sol Vista Health for 5 years and has worked with the child and family team, the criminal justice team, and the substance use disorder team. She has extensive training in the treatment of substance abuse disorders, especially when those symptoms co-occur with mental health symptoms. Her approach is informed by her educational background in social work, which sees behavioral health problems in the context of systems, issues, and social injustice. She's credentialed as an LCSW and holds a Master of Social Work degree from Colorado State University. And then, Jake is here. Jake Schoenfeld is the student body president and is also a member of the National Honor Society, JKB, and FBLA. He's a three-sport athlete in football, wrestling, and track, and his ambitions of becoming an engineer or an elementary school teacher. And this year he's taking an internship through the elementary school in a contracting firm. And then Jamie Treat's also with us. She's a senior also at Salida High School, where she's student body vice president, involved in other clubs and organizations such as FBLA, NHS, JKB, and Young Life. And she's the assistant editor and ads manager of the Tenderfoot Times. She enjoys reading and writing and tutors students in any subject. She'll be attending college next year somewhere in Colorado and intends to study English education. Great. And then Will is here. Will Waddell is our middle school principal. He's been working with middle school aged youth for the past 24 years as a teacher, coach, dean, assistant principal, and now principal. His experience in urban and rural school settings allows for a unique perspective into the behavior of adolescent children. So in 2013, he and his family moved from Denver and now live in Salida and are blessed with 2 wonderful daughters and a loving wife. And Tony Fox is with us also. I have Tony Savage is the owner of 3D Cannabis Centers. She's a 43-year-old mother of 1 son. He's 4.5. 3D Cannabis Center was established as a medical marijuana center in Denver on April 20th, 2010. On January 1st of this year, it converted 100% to adult use retail marijuana sales, and Tony made the first recognized legal adult use retail cannabis sale in the country. On October 1st of this year, 3D Cannabis Center Salida opens its doors as the second adult use recreational sales location for that business. Great. And then we have Officer Don Weibel from Salida PD. He's lived and worked in Chaffee County for 51 years. Awesome. He has raised his family and watched his grandchildren grow up in Chaffee County and worked for Salida PD for 26 years. And then we have Kayla Maddox with Family and Youth Initiatives. She's worked there for 4 years and is currently the manager of the Youth at Crossroads program, which aims to reduce teen substance use and high-risk behaviors by teaching evidence-based curriculum and providing alternative activities for teens. She's certified substance use prevention specialist too, has a degree in education with a cultural diversity emphasis, and has taught children and teens for over 10 years. So great. So we're glad that each of you is here. We've got a few questions we're going to have the panelists start talking to, and then after that, we'll open it up to all of your questions. So, one of the first questions we have is, what are the current laws and ordinances at the local and state level regarding marijuana? And so we had asked Officer Weibel and Tony to speak to this one.
You want me to start? Well, for law enforcement and people that are trying to police this. The law has really not changed for us. For persons under the age of 21 years old, nothing has changed. If you're under 21 years old, you cannot legally possess, consume, or purchase marijuana or marijuana ingesting paraphernalia. There are medical marijuana exceptions, and a patient may be younger than 21 years of age. But in general speaking, if you're under 21, it's like it has been forever. You cannot possess, consume marijuana. So that being said, I think the easiest thing that what we should touch on is what's now legal in Colorado. So for persons within Colorado boundaries that are 21 years or older, you may now legally possess, consume, purchase up to 1 ounce of marijuana and marijuana ingesting paraphernalia. You may also grow no more than 6 marijuana plants in an enclosed locked space. Still, you cannot legally sell marijuana. You cannot, I couldn't sell marijuana to my friend. You can't sell it to your friends, even though you can grow 6 plants at your house. For persons over 21 years of age, transporting marijuana in a vehicle is now legal with regulations. There's no open containers or consumption inside the vehicle. Still, like it has always been, this has not changed. No person shall operate a motor vehicle under the influence of alcohol and/or drugs. If THC, marijuana, is identified in a driver's blood in quantities of 5 nanograms or higher, such facts will give rise to the permissible inference that the driver was under the influence of marijuana. Driving under the influence of marijuana or alcohol is a misdemeanor with escalating penalties for each offense. No one in the state of Colorado can openly and publicly legally display or consume marijuana, the way it's always been. Illegal possession or consumption of marijuana in public is a petty offense.
And that about sums it up. In the recreational marijuana stores, it's very similar to a liquor store. You have to be 21 with a government-issued ID, but we can service anyone from anywhere in the world with a government-issued ID reflecting that they're 21. If they're an out-of-state or out-of-country visitor, they can purchase up to 7 grams of cannabis, which is about a handful of cannabis per transaction. And out-of-state visitors are also allowed to have up to 1 ounce in their possession at any given time. But again, under 21, the laws are the same. They haven't changed. There is no legal right for anyone under 21 to be possessing or consuming cannabis unless, like Don had said, they are a medical marijuana right card holder. But again, no public consumption, no consumption before operating equipment. The rules are very cut and dry. They're very clear.
The second question is, what changes are we seeing locally with medical marijuana and now recreational legalization related to the passing and enforcing of these ordinances? So I'll give each of you a chance. If you don't want to speak to this topic, it's perfectly fine. Dr. Berkeley, you want to start? So again, changes we're seeing locally with medical and now recreational legalization relating to ordinances and use.
I'm not certain that I've seen a lot of changes locally. We definitely saw a lot of changes with legalizing medical marijuana, but I think Don could speak to that better. My understanding is that was more a law enforcement issue because of diversion to minors and diversion to people without cards. There was a lot of that going on. But from a medical perspective, locally, I don't think we saw really a big change.
Yeah, and in the mental health center, we haven't seen much of a change either. There hasn't been an increase in referrals for teenagers with a cannabis abuse or dependence diagnosis or any problems associated with that. And there could be a lot of reasons behind that. I think it's definitely made. There has been a difference in how treatment kind of pans out with adults, especially adults who are involved in the legal system now that marijuana has been legalized.
So what we have to say really was gathered from our school community, different students' opinions and what they've seen. And so Jake, I'll take it away.
Okay, so the first thing we've kind of seen is that it's easier for our students to get. All the students are like, okay, yeah, it's not a problem. It's a cool thing to do. Everyone can do it. And so we've seen kind of a lack of work ethic, kind of, I guess. As we go out there and present our ideas as a student body vice president and president, we just present our ideas and we see a lack of motivation to go out and do those things. So.
Yeah, not necessarily just because of this legalization as of late, but we see that a lot of young students are being affected. I'm talking about like 6th graders, 7th graders. I feel like it's getting younger and younger. And this, I feel like, just is it's kind of passed down through a system of how students view their older peers. I know that if my little brother saw me doing something, he would automatically think that it was all right or that it was cool. And so I think that that's just a process of youth in general. And so I feel like younger and younger people are.
And we don't know if this is like actually a thing that the teenage brain thinks of, but one student actually told us that it is almost like a gateway thing for him, because the marijuana started and he's like, marijuana is not my fun thing anymore. I need to move on to something else. So he kind of started moving up in the chain of the drug things and mixing drugs and alcohol together. Because he said it's more fun to do that rather than just stay with my marijuana.
Mm-hmm. And then I know that in the school we've seen more drug dogs and drug busts. We've really seen more of a authorial, is that a word? Authoritative presence as of the legalization, just because it has been, I think, a little bit of an issue in our school. So that's about it.
I would echo what was just said by the students as far as an increase in availability and kind of a perception of acceptance by students, and especially with younger students. So I know that the THC levels, the toxicity of the product of the drug is higher than it used to be, and I think that's causing a problem with some of our kids as well. But I think part of it right now is the perception and really needing a true understanding from the youth in the community as well as the community as a whole as to what is and is not acceptable, what is and is not legal. From a school perspective, very similar to the police department, it's still not legal at school, it's still not okay to have at school, and it's still not tolerated at school. So I think a challenge for us as a forum is really to look at a preventative and educational slice of that pie instead of being so reactionary with everything that's happening.
I think that's surprising for me to hear, but what I think it speaks to is the need for age-appropriate brain developmental education. So we really need to identify for the youth what impacts using substances has on their brains, and not condoning it. I mean, that's the deal, is that just because I'm for adults being allowed to use cannabis, certainly as an industry and as an activist, I'm not saying that it's good on the developing brain at all, but the fear factor is that adolescents are going to be using it more prevalently, so I think we need to take more of an aggressive, age-appropriate training program, perhaps, for our youth, and just continue to educate them.
And I would say that a few things. The medical marijuana industry is a highly regulated industry, and I think that it's they've tightened up a lot of the people that were able to get medical marijuana cards at the beginning, where they had roaming doctors that went around. We had a doctor that came here in a RV and set up and was giving out medical marijuana cards. And that, I think, has been tightened up, and it's a highly regulated industry, and I think that's getting better. As far as for locally, with as it's affected us in law enforcement, I did contact the Chaffee County Records Department. They researched it. From January to December in 2013, we recorded 4 arrests. And when I say 4 arrests, what I'm talking about is kids that were 14 years and younger that was caught with consuming possession of marijuana. At the age of 14 and over, we issue them a summons, release them to their parents, and those records are very difficult to get and would be inaccurate at best. In this year, 2014, January to October 29th, we've had 6 arrests, so we've increased that by 2 to October. We still have a few months to go. And that's 14 years and younger, kids that have been arrested for possessing, consuming marijuana. Like I say, after 14 years and over, we just issue them a ticket and release them to their parents. So I don't have a number for that. So for us, I think we've certainly seen an increase of having marijuana at schools since the inception of recreational pot. But I think that this has got to be answered in education. I think parents got to become more responsible of where they're storing their marijuana, like we did, like we went through with alcohol. We have to, as parents, accept some responsibility. We're going to have some marijuana in our house to keep track of it. So I think education is the key.
Yeah, just in terms of what we've seen over at Family and Youth Initiatives and Youth at Crossroads, we are kind of that front line of education for the youth in our community, or we're becoming that more and more. But we have seen an increase in referrals to our programs because we get youth directly that are court ordered or on a deferred sentence. And then we also do the school-based programs. So we have seen a spike in referrals since the school year started out. And again, just echoing what everyone has said, is that youth are perceiving it as being safe because it's legal. And again, it's just ongoing education about the teen brain, doing more of what we did here tonight with the youth, just to make them more aware of the reasons that they're choosing to use marijuana. People do drugs to feel good or feel better. I mean, and we just need to not be afraid to have those conversations and talk about, is it just the risk-taking nature of their brain? Is it because they're self-medicating they're at a higher risk for anxiety and depression? So it's more community conversations around our mental health and well-being, and giving our kids those tools to understand reasons behind their use if they're choosing to use. From data that we've seen, youth nationwide, it's the #1 most abused illicit substance, still called illicit with it being federally illegal. It's the #1 reason that we've seen that youth are in treatment, just because it's so commonly used and thought of as a safe way to feel better. So that's just some of the data we've seen and what we've seen locally.
Thank you all. The next question on the long-term effects of teen and adult marijuana use. We're going to have Dr. Berkeley and Kayla comment on this. We skimmed the surface in the PowerPoint, so please just add anything or re-emphasize anything that stands out to you about long-term effects of teen and adult use.
Want me to start? I guess long-term effects of adult use, I mean, that's still a little bit to be determined, but it's definitely, from what we understand, not as significant as starting as a teenager. So like Debbie was saying in the PowerPoint, the younger you start and the more frequently you use any substance, the more likely you are to form an addiction. And it's argued whether or not it's physiologically and chemically addictive, but it becomes part of your brain's functioning when you're incorporating it into your brain, and it's taking place of that ANA and anandamide even sooner. So it's not allowing the brain to learn how to self-regulate when you're starting as a teenager. So just important points there. And like Debbie said, we've seen decreases in memory, problem-solving ability, addiction or dependency upon the substance to just maintain normalcy when you start at a young age. So those are more of what we're seeing with the youth, and it definitely varies from adult onset marijuana use.
But Debbie touched on that New Zealand study that really is the best data that we have for long term, especially kids starting early, because they I think started following kids when they were 14 and followed them until they were 32 or 33. And she mentioned the fact that IQ drops by 8 points, and the differences in achievement in that group of kids, now adults, versus the group that were non-users is pretty astounding. The thing is, we don't have good data in the U.S. because nobody really studied marijuana because it's been illegal. We have, there's lots of small studies for medical use, but none of them are really that good. And the problem with this study is that it's already way out of date when you consider the fact that when they started studying those kids, the average level of THC was something like, it was less than 4%. It was 3 point something %. And now the average level is about 13%, and sometimes as high as 30%, sometimes as high as 70%. Maybe you can talk to that more, Tony. But the levels of THC are so much higher that you kind of wonder, is that study even valid anymore? Mm-hmm. And so I think, and Kayla also mentioned the fact that there's lots of debate about addiction versus dependence. But the problem is, like she said, also that as soon as somebody starts to say that they feel normal when they're using a substance, that's dependence. Whether there's physiologic addiction and physiologic withdrawal or not, once you have that kind of once you have to do it to feel normal, then that's dependence. And you see that, and you're 18 times more likely to be dependent if you start before you're 17.
Thank you both. Next question, we'll ask Jamie and Jake and Will to speak to this one. What do you hear or observe from our students and youth in our community about marijuana, alcohol, prescription drugs, and other drugs? Changes and other observations. And I know you've each touched upon that, but if you had anything else you wanted to add, please do so.
Okay, so we kind of went down and asked some people. We sat in the cafeteria, we're like, okay, we have a tally sheet. We had people come by and we asked them. We had 3 different groups. The group that was like, you know what? I don't care if they use it. I will never use it. The group that like, this is terrible. They should never use it. And the group that's like, we love marijuana. So there's like 3 different groups. And we saw that about 50% of the students were like, pro marijuana. I don't have to use it, but pro, it's great.
Yeah, and then the other half were against it, or another option. We've seen a lot that kids think that you should at least try it once. Kind of from what was previously mentioned, kids want the experience. It's an ambiguous thing if they haven't ever tried it, if they haven't been around it, and so it's mysterious and intriguing. And so a lot of kids at least want to try it once, if not more.
It's become more vocal within our school too. Like, it's more talked about. Like, alcohol used to be like the big thing. Oh my gosh, you drink alcohol. Now it's like, oh, alcohol is a normal thing. And so the marijuana is kind of becoming a normal activity as well. So
we've also seen kids who take painkillers, whether they get them from other students who have had surgeries. There seems to be almost a market for Vicodin, Coumadin, stuff like that. And I don't know what that does for the students, but that's what we've seen.
So we just have 3 quotes from the different 3 sections that I just talked about. So she'll read the first one.
Marijuana is an inappropriate overused drug that, in my opinion, may potentially damage the brain because it's so overused. And so that was these are all from students, and we tried to get them from different cliques, different groups, to different venues.
I feel it's not beneficial towards high school students, but I would never use it, but I have nothing against it as well.
Mm-hmm. And then the last one, I would not advise starting at a young age. At least get through high school, because high school is about getting through it, and you don't need anything that would make it harder. You have the rest of your life to have fun with these sort of things, and then it'll change you. For some people it's good, for others it's not so good. And that came from someone who has used it quite a bit, and so I thought that was a really interesting take on it. He suggested, just because of lack of motivation, and especially grades in his personal life, that it's been hard to get through it because he made some choices earlier in his high school career that is hard to rebound from, and so he just advises not using it so young.
Thank you guys for collecting all that too. Great.
And I guess I would just add things I've heard, and I don't know if it has to do with it being legalized recreationally or just in general with middle school and high school students, is that it's legal, that it's medicine. It has a medical benefit, and some of that is children not having information and just hearing things. So I still think there's a ginormous preventative educational piece to it. But there was a survey that Debbie mentioned, the Healthy Kids Colorado survey, and for just middle school, I have our middle school results. And unfortunately, when it looks at marijuana use in the last 30 days, alcohol use in the last 30 days, our children exceed the state average. And that's not a good one to exceed the state average in. We do exceed the state average in some real positives with it's funny because with healthy lifestyles and physical activity and nutrition, and then we turn around and exceed the state averages and ever used marijuana, have used it recently, and have ever drank alcohol, and have how much have you had recently to drink? So, you know, I do think there's a hip cool factor that is perceived, and I think with middle school children in particular, what they see adults and older kids doing can be problematic. So there's an opportunity, I see it as an opportunity for us as a community to really come together and address the issue that is certainly out there.
Kayla, did you also want to comment on this, given that you're at Crossroads working with students?
Yeah, and I guess what I see with the students that I work with too is it's a larger societal issue as well. Like in the United States, we've kind of become a substance dependent society. I need a pill to fix this. I need a drug for that. I need. And again, it's just more of the mental health education and whole family education in terms of, you know, mom might be taking this medicine, but what's it for? And just becoming more proactive about our health and staying healthy mentally, so that those might be last case resorts if necessary. So again, just ongoing and continuing education with everyone that we can.
We're going to wrap up. We have one last prepared question and then open it up to all of your questions and comments. And we'll invite each of you to comment on this. What do you think is one of the most critical local issues around underage marijuana and other drug use that needs to be addressed right now, and a strategy or two on how best to address this as a community-wide? Kayla, you want to start?
Sure. So for critical issues to be addressed, again, awareness of the teen brain and teen brain development, I think that's incredibly crucial at a developmentally appropriate age. The best thing we can do with our kids is give them the proper tools and give them education and awareness, not hide it and keep it a secret, because that's not going to happen anymore. So we need to trust our teens to make the right decisions for themselves and have those conversations with them. Again, reducing the teen access, though, that's a big community risk factor. When youth have access to substances, they're just more likely to use it simply because it's available. So just continuing to rein that in and work on that. Collaboration between agencies, more of what we're doing tonight, is absolutely important. And then just working on some of that advertisement piece, where it can be called a safer substance, or we know almost all marketing is geared towards teens and adolescents and children. That just kind of becomes the nature of marketing around many things. So we just need to continue to work on that, and just be thinking about our advertisements, because they're falling on teen ears often more than adult ears, because they're already set in what they're going to carry out and do. So I think those are my main concerns and issues.
I think a critical issue regarding underage marijuana use is education for the parents and other adults regarding preventing underage marijuana use. And I think that I've heard this said many times, and I believe it's absolutely true, is one of the key reasons that teens choose not to use drugs is because they know their parents don't approve of drug use. And I think we have to be better parents. And I think that would help a lot. I think as a suggested strategy that I have is that I think I'm amazed at how much internet information there is. I mean, I started gathering information for this, and with a click of the mouse, I had more I could have read for days about underage marijuana consumption. So there's a lot of information and opinions out on the internet. I don't know if it's all good information, but it's something to think about. And I think interactive discussions regarding prevention of substance abuse and programs, it would lead to reduction in substance abuse. So I think this is a good way to start, and I hope it don't end here.
An idea I had while I was sitting here is thinking about, I think that we definitely need to involve the parents more in the discussion, as well as the age-appropriate school classes. But maybe there's something that we could do with middle school and high school parents, sending out a flyer explaining about the exit packagings, the importance of putting up your cannabis just like you would put up your pharmaceuticals. Everything that we sell is in a pharmaceutical pill bottle. So put that up with your pills, treat them as a prescription or as you would your alcohol. Maybe it's a campaign that we can get through with Chaffee County school systems, that we could do a PSA to all parents as well, maybe offer some sort of discounted exit package or secure storage package that they could put their cannabis in, and that would be something that I know as an industry we would support that 100% as well. So it's not only ongoing education for the teenagers and the youth, but the parents as well.
I guess I would just add, I would echo what has been said, but if the question is, what are the most critical local issues, in my mind is the safety of our children, whether that's at home or whether that's at school. As an educator in Salida, as a parent in Salida, I think that is paramount to everyone's best interest to keep our kids safe. So how do we do that? I don't have that answer, but I'm willing to work on that answer.
Thank you for bringing it up.
And then this may seem obvious, but partying is an issue, alcohol consumption. That's where we see a lot of drug consumption as well, is in partying. And that, I feel like, comes from just being in Salida, there's nothing to do. And so how do kids have fun? They get together and do whatever they do. And so I feel like if we provided other alternatives, something that's attractive, something that's fun, something that's worth their while, then maybe they would spend less of their time, doing other things, and we could have something like that's constructive, or yeah, that's all.
And I see these guys addressing the parents a lot, and I see a lot of parents out here, but I don't see many of my high school peers out here who need to be addressing this too. So that's what I feel like a big issue is they don't really understand. So there's a couple back over here and a couple there, but
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, I agree with what these guys are talking about. Definitely, I think education is huge, and I know that with cannabis, you can find something on the internet to support any belief or any agenda that you have around it. There's a lot of really bad information, so I think it's really important to have quality education and to teach teenagers how to discern whether or not what they're reading is something that they should give credit to.
And I will use it as a plug just to remind you at the resource table up there, we've got age-appropriate materials, again, for parents and role modeling, and for teens and websites that have all been vetted. So please go take a look there. And of course, our panelists are a good source of that.
I think the biggest local issue is just education. Marijuana use in Colorado was fairly high even prior to legalization, and so it was already common. And I think that the idea that it was common and then it was made medically legal implies that it's safe. And I think we just have to continuously dispel that notion that it's safe for everyone, especially young people. And they've done that well in the middle school and in the high school, presenting that data about what's really happening versus the perception of what's happening. And I think that impacts kids, and you guys could say if that's true, but I see that stuff in the schools and it makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. All right, we'd love to hear your questions. Divvy's going to come around and collect note cards. If you wrote a question down, feel free to hand it up, but also to get us going, if anyone wants to raise their hand. Yeah, but we'll go in some order here. Yes, you get to go first.
Typed out instead of on the.
Oh, okay. You can read them. I mean, if you would, that's fine. Would you like to go ahead and read your question? Yeah. Oh, are you sure? Okay. All right. Of course.
I'd like a clarification from Officer Weibel on the difference between 14 and younger and 14 and older. You said you arrest the younger ones?
Well,
you ticket and release the older ones?
yes.
I don't get it.
But, well, when I say arrest, is we take them physically into custody,
Yeah.
and we take them and we release them to their parents eventually. Yes, we don't. But what it's called is a direct filing through the district attorney's office. And they like to have more control over the 14 and under group because they can refer them through. There are diversion programs. There's ways to keep this little minor offenses off of their records. And so they like to have 14 and under arrested and then referred to them for a juvenile filing. 14 and over, we issue them a ticket, release them to their parents, and they go to they'll have a court date and they appear with their parents at court.
You do the same thing, just out of curiosity, if they get caught with alcohol.
Yes. exactly the same thing. Alcohol and
many-
drugs are
You
the,
know how many you had that were called in possession of alcohol or?
no, I don't have that number. I mean, I could have asked for it, but I just wanted the marijuana arrest, yeah.
Almost unanimously, all of you said that education is one of the biggest issues that we need to address when it comes to minor abuse of marijuana. And I was thinking, like, would you say that boredom could probably be one of the major causes of drug abuse, not just of marijuana, but of alcohol and, like, the students mentioned pills? Pills is a really big issue. And I just wanted to know, like, what Jody and Dr. Berkeley thought of that, and probably Dr. Weibel, sorry, as well. Dr. Weibel? Yes, Dr. Weibel.
Thank you.
Very skilled, it's true. Lots of experience.
I would say kind of. Boredom is something that, like, there's studies where, you know, pretty much all teenagers report boredom. And when they do interventions where they teach them skills to, you know, keep themselves occupied, those tend to work for a couple months and then the results fade. Some of the things that have been more highly associated with, there's all sorts of other risk factors that are more associated with use, things like lack of like impulsivity and lack of self-control skills, accessibility to drugs, you know, academic problems, things like that, having a history of poverty, exposure to violence, neglect, things like that. But so kind of, I do think that kids are really attracted to risk, and that we should be offering risks that are good risks, like applying for jobs and sports teams, and I don't know, writing a letter to the paper, things that are exciting and kind of get you going, but that are a kind of a good risk to take and are likely to lead to something beneficial happening in your life.
I have a question here. Is there any benefit in having former marijuana users talking to kids about marijuana? I.e., why they quit, why they had a change in their life?
I don't know if the kids want to speak to that, how they
I think.
perceive. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, I think that maybe that'd be a great idea to come into our school maybe as a whole and discuss that. Because I mean, I know some students that'd be very intrigued to hear what they say. Because I know some pro and I know some con, and right in the middle, like I said, all three of those groups would be kind of intrigued to hear what the marijuana user that was a former user had to say about it.
Absolutely. I know that when we bring in speakers just for our student body on different topics, what we look at is relatability and how a speaker can establish credibility for students, because I think that's something that we take into heart. It's like, who are you to say this to me? And if you have some sort of credibility, then it's much more likely for us to listen. So I would agree.
And I guess I would add, while I'm not opposed to it, I'm not sure that scared straight mentality is going to be overly effective. It's an image issue right now with youth. You look at athletes, you look at movie stars, you look at musicians, and it's an acceptable it's an acceptable thing to do as an adult. So how do you find that right person to come in that would have that credibility or that street cred with kids that would be impactful?
And research tends to show that just prevention-based programs in terms of like longer dosages of prevention education, so where you're actually helping the kids learn skills around how to deal with boredom, how to deal with family issues going on at home, how to have a better sense of self. Those are the things that tend to show reductions in high-risk behavior, again, because they're getting the tools and the skills that they need over a longer period of time versus like the one-hit wonder assembly, yay, that was great for a day, and then, but what life skills did that give us to make and practice different choices? So I would say that those can be valuable because that can touch that person at a different level, but again, it's just learning a lot more about themselves and how to function as adults in the world as they keep growing.
What did you say earlier about our society? It's a larger society issue in our country.
Yeah.
Not just in Salida, but in our country.
It just, and this might be my personal opinion on it, but we had a parent comment too at our forum in Buena Vista just about the widespread abuse of prescription drugs. That's one of the most widely abused substances in the adult realm. So we've just become very substance dependent instead of being more proactive about our health, I think, as a society. So it's something that we need to look at as well, encouraging healthy behaviors from a young age, because just like it can be negative with substances, the younger you start doing something, you might continue. Same with healthy behaviors and healthy eating. The younger you start that, the more it becomes routine, the more it becomes habit, you're likely to carry that through your adult years. So it's, again, continuing education around that, starting from a young age and from the family level too.
Did you have other questions in there?
I don't. But I see some people have questions over.
Yeah.
Some over here,
There's
too.
a lot of Kirsten, Ms. Love?
Well, you've all spoken about education is what's necessary for our community, and I'd just like to put it out there to everyone in the room, not just the panelists, but where's the funding for this education going to come from? Who's going to fund it?
I write grants.
Yeah, there is.
Other than Taylor writing a grant.
I think depending on what that looks like, I'd be happy to contribute and get my peers in the industry to contribute as well. We've all talked about that, funding some sort of age-appropriate educational activities. So if there's a program that's up and there's money needed, I would hope that you would come to our industry and ask for it.
And from a state level too, we're already seeing marijuana tax dollars being disseminated to the states and then spread out. So I'm already seeing requests for applications and things like that for additional marijuana tax dollars. So we're definitely going to do our best to bring that money into the community to continue to offer
Do they
programs.
do anything with the alcohol industry, or maybe Patrick Kennedy and Sam get his pharmaceutical buddies to kick in a little bit for all the OxyContin that's floating around in the middle schools and high school?
It's a good question. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure they see a lot more pills than they see marijuana.
It's definitely there.
Well, I don't know if that would be true.
Yeah, I don't think
But you got plenty of pills in.
2 years ago, yeah. I think the problem with opiates in general and other prescription pain pills is they were considered medicine and we didn't take it seriously as a risk.
Right.
And there was so much of it put out that now we have people switching over to heroin because it's cheaper and easier to get high.
Yeah, that's right.
Did you guys have some questions?
Here's my card.
Well,
Choose
I
your
just
card.
wanted to speak to the funding that will probably be coming down through the state. Currently, CU Public Health, CU University of Colorado School of Public Health, they are right now doing a joint survey with CDPHE, which is Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment. And the survey is going to be going out to providers, retailers, users, women who are breastfeeding, women who are pregnant. It'll be going out to a variety of counties within Colorado, probably about 15 from a variety of areas, rural, urban, and such. And I think that survey is going to be used to inform CDPHE and also the School of Public Health on best routes for how education should be disseminated, to who should be doing it. And my guess is that they will look to public health for a large piece of that. A few years ago, I know we received money for methamphetamine research in the county. So I think that will be another area that will be receiving funding. And generally that gets pushed out to all the counties that have public health agencies.
Here's a good one.
I got one little thing that I'd like to add.
How is driving under the influence of cannabis dangerous? And along with that, how do you test for cannabis DUI?
It's a blood test, and the government has, or the legislation in Colorado has arrived at 5 nanograms as a number, like we have a number for alcohol. And I personally don't know much about 5 nanograms. I couldn't tell you how much you would have to smoke to get to 5 nanograms. I think she maybe could tell us more about that, but I have been told that people that regularly smoke marijuana may, when they're totally sober, have 5 nanograms in their system. But that's the number, and that's the number that we use, that's the number we are given, and the number we're gonna use. So if it's fair or not, I don't know. It will be tested in court. There'll be test cases, many of them, before that number is the number, but for right now it is the number, and it's tested by blood.
And actually in Arizona, the Arizona Supreme Court ruled that the amount of THC in your system is not alone enough for PC to arrest somebody for driving under the influence. Just for that very reason.
It will be tested, right now in Colorado, we're using 5 nanograms for the number.
You could have that in your system
and that's
3 weeks after
and that's a
marijuana.
presumptive number. If we draw your blood and you're at 5 nanograms, the presumption is going to be you were under the influence of marijuana. That's the presumption. Now,
Dr. Berkeley, can you speak of the effects of, what was the other question? How is driving under the influence dangerous, and maybe talking about that idea of how 3 weeks later you can still, 3 weeks after smoking, you can still go over the limit?
Well, part of this thing with the 5 nanograms and how and whether or not you're still being affected by that later, especially if you're a regular user, a lot of the thinking now is that if you smoke today, you actually do have continuing effects on executive function. Even, I mean, we don't know exactly how long. Executive function is all the stuff that you talked about, and that's memory, that's decision making, that's risk avoidance. So you driving under the influence, if you just smoke, certainly if you drew your blood, an hour or two after you smoked, it would be quite high, and it tends to drift down very slowly after that. And the effects are certainly highest right after that, but there's no question that within and even one hit of marijuana for most people, especially high THC contents, will last for several hours, 3 to 4 hours, which is difficult to quantify because when you can say, well, for most people, if you have one alcoholic drink, everybody metabolizes that fairly consistently. Except women metabolize it slightly slower than men, but about 1 ounce of alcohol per hour. But you just don't know with marijuana. We don't know. Nobody does. Right. So we don't know, and I think we're striving for this number, but yeah, it's difficult to say.
Why is it dangerous to drive?
Well, again, because your perception is altered and your decision making. You have to make rapid decisions, and your concentration is altered. Much the same as with alcohol.
Do you think it's equally or more dangerous to smoke under the influence of marijuana? Like, is it the same as alcohol, or is it? Yeah, John, what did I say? Is it the same, or worse, or less worse?
I don't know.
And I get that question a lot as well, and I think neither of them is safer. I mean, I think that's the safest thing to go on. The best way to drive is sober. Just like Debbie was talking about, the portion of the brain, the hippocampus, I can't remember which one it is, but that controls initiation of sudden movements too. So like some of your reactionary time and your perception of time. So, the joke used to be like, you can tell if someone's drinking because they're going 90 miles an hour, and if someone's smoking pot, they're going 7 miles an hour. But I don't know that that's really an accurate representation, because you're still feeling like you're carrying out normal motor function, but your judgment is off. So you see that stop sign, and your foot doesn't initiate at the same rate it would if you were sober, and you might not stop. I mean, there isn't a safer one when you're operating a vehicle. Go ahead.
I don't mean to put you in the hot seat, but
Go ahead.
I did some research before I came, and I actually investigated that a little bit, and I couldn't find a study that proved that marijuana affected your actual reaction time. It does, like you guys said, affect those different parts of the brain while you're smoking, and it hasn't been proven in adults that it has long-term effects. But is there anything you can point to and say it does reduce reaction time or anything like that?
If just some of the research, yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, we've seen differing data, and so like we were saying before, you can find, there's lies, dirty lies in statistics. I mean, you can find things to support whatever your agenda is, so we really try to go off of what we see as the least biased and off of nationally recognized sources. So we have seen some that shows how the reaction time and the judgment is differing, just based on
And
what
also
Debbie was talking about.
accidents, you know, there's a couple of pamphlets out there that are brand new. I mean, they're from like June of this year with statistics, and it's really good stuff. But it shows, you know, the percentages of a high percentage of fatal accidents, you know, had marijuana involved. So
When you
that
say
would tell
marijuana
me.
involved, like, does that mean possessing
Assuming
it
they
or the
smoked it.
influence?
Well, you could mean
Assuming
a
the
drunk
person was
too.
under the influence.
Right.
Is it solely
On a prescription
what-
drug or
was it
whatever
solely
else.
what they were using, or were they using something else?
Well, I'll let you look at the data.
We're gonna grab a question from back here.
You know, Debbie, the one, if I may, just the one theme that seems to be central that everybody just keeps going through is what are the studies, where are the studies? If you really want to know something you can do, you can call your state rep, your congressperson, or your United States senator, and tell them to declassify marijuana so people aren't afraid that they'll get arrested if they do the study. It's as simple as that. That's the number one thing that everybody could do. Not reschedule it, not make it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2, because what that will do, that will give only the pharmaceutical companies and Patrick Kennedy and his buddies at SAM the right to study marijuana. But it won't give real scientists like these people here the opportunity to do it. So if you really want the answer, that's the answer, is to call your senator and say, get President Obama, who's always talking about using his phone and his pen, to use his pen to just take it off the schedule completely. And then everybody will test it and you'll have all the answers in the world that you want.
We're gonna take about 2 more questions just based on time.
All right, so regarding you, Roman, so what you're saying is that the reaction time is slowing down is just a side effect, a varied side effect.
Well, kind of what I said is when I was doing research, and she talked about reputable sources and stuff, so that's why I kind of couldn't find anything, because there's a lot of stuff out there, obviously.
All right.
But what I did find was that most of, like when an adult is smoking cannabis, the centers of the brain that are affected go back to normal after they're no longer high. So that's why I asked her about the reaction time and car crashes.
Now, doctor, Berkeley, right, sorry. I was wondering now, would you know anything about the side effects of marijuana and if they vary on person, just like prescription drugs?
I think they definitely vary among, certainly some people have more tolerance than others, definitely.
But again, hard to know what the dosage to
Yeah.
And prescription drugs are actually safe when used as prescribed. So. Yeah, please.
Except for the side
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm curious, I have heard and seen a lot of people having really, really bad reactions to edibles to the point of being incredibly dangerous. And that's my biggest fear for the youth is the edibles, because I think they're more available. And is there any education going on for these guys about how dangerous meth is, because you have no control what you just ate, it's in your body?
We're trying.
They're trying. What's going on? I mean, because I think that's way more dangerous than a joint being passed around.
I'd like to address that, because that is the biggest concern, I think, for everybody is edibles, the dosage on edibles, how to take them. Are we regulating them effectively? And we see at the legislature, there's still a lot of discussion about constricting or limiting the amount per edible that's sold. Currently in the recreational industry, you can only sell an edible that has 100 milligrams of THC or less. And it has to be broken down into 10 milligram increments. So the state has determined with a lot of studies that 5 to 10 milligrams of THC is a single serving dosage similar to an alcoholic beverage. And as an industry, we're taking it very, very seriously about educating the consumer about edibles and how they impact you. Another huge plus to a regulated market is that every edible is tested. So So previously edibles were not tested or regulated. Now they're tested for potency, along with many other tests that are done, and they're all put in pharmaceutical pill bottles. So they look just like any kind of medicine. It's not, there are candies, but they're not visible any longer. So, and that's in the recreational. If you go into a medical marijuana store, you're going to see gummy bears on the shelf that you can see through a clear package. So I think regulation is definitely, we're taking a paradigm shift, and we're focused on educating the consumer. Every time you get that edible, that same edible from us as well, that dosage is going to be exactly the same. So it's much easier to regulate a retail marijuana edible than a cookie or a brownie that you get from a friend or at a party. So again, it's all about education. Edibles are very dangerous because of the long-lasting effect on them as well. So as far as driving impaired, things of that nature, edibles they're no joke. They're to be taken very seriously. When you eat too much of an edible, you don't ever want to have that experience again. So again, we try very hard to educate everybody as far as what the proper dosage is, and the fact that it is a heavy sedative.
Mm-hmm. What about the edibles that a person would make on their own? Don't they do that?
Well, in Colorado, you have the right to make your own edibles because of Amendment 64, in addition to the medical program. And a lot of people find relief. Edibles are fairly expensive. Retail-wise. So a lot of people can purchase just a cup of cannabis-infused butter or oil to make their own edibles. And again, that is going to have a varying dosage level as far as servings go. So we definitely recommend purchasing them through a licensed retailer. Same with the cannabis. Our cannabis is much more potent these days, but we know it. We test every batch of cannabis to know the THC, and we know that there's no contaminants or pesticides or mildews or bugs in there. So the regulated market might not be ideal, but it is a step in the right direction. Marijuana has only been a gateway drug because it's been in the hands of illegal drug dealers that don't check IDs, and they don't care if they're selling marijuana or meth. So the regulated system, although it might not be perfect, it's a step in the right direction.
Great, and I just want to acknowledge, if anyone needs to leave, please feel free to do so. We're going to wrap this up within 5 minutes, and any remaining questions, you can stick around and interact with our panelists. This is really the good stuff, so thank you.
I had one thing to add about education, because that was addressed in the legislation when they decided to legalize recreational marijuana. The education, our legislators have put that into the offense part of it, the penalties for being, especially for underage youth, 21 and under, that get caught with it. So I would just like to read, there's three different, the penalties get more, I guess, it gets more severe as you have more penalties. So the first offense, the legislation set up that you would have a fine. This is for 21 and under for illegal consumption, possession of marijuana. First offense, you get a fine of $100 or a requirement to complete a substance abuse educational program, or both. That would be required through the courts. On your second offense, you get a fine of not more than $100, and then you're going to be required by the court to complete a substance abuse education program, an order for substance abuse assessment, if appropriate, and complete any treatment that's recommended by the assessment, and perform up to 24 hours of public service. Third and subsequent offenses, your fine's going to go up to $250. You will have a court order for a substance abuse assessment, and any treatment recommended by the assessment you're going to have to do, and 36 hours of public service. So that education was, I mean, these are the kids that are actually in the system that have been abusing the drug, that the courts have, they did foresee that as being a problem, and they're going to, that education is going to be paid for by the abuser. I mean, they're going to court order you to do that. So I think that some of that education is going to happen to the kids that are abusing drugs, abusing the marijuana.
Thank you for those facts.
Yeah.
Will, did you have anything?
There's a gentleman.
No, I have one. I'm just wondering, I direct this to the principal too. In the school system, do you have any meetings with the teachers so they can throw a red flag or blow a whistle on a student, just in case they're getting into trouble? Because a teacher probably has the most contact with a student?
I would not say we have formal meetings with every teacher about students, but certainly in the middle school and the high school, there's a kind of a belief system and a policy with the administration in the building, with the staff in the building, with a nurse, a counselor in the building, to, hey, I've got a question about this kid. I think something's going on with this child, or something's going on with this kid at home or at school. Can we look into it? What can we do? And we actually have a real good relationship with Sol Vista, formerly West Central, and the counselors and therapists around here to address that. It just,
So you get a student does have
we certainly try to do
opportunity
that.
that might happen.
Yes.
Yes.
And one other question that bothers me is the taxes that we're receiving from cannabis, and I guess I'll address that to you, is that offsetting the problems that we're having in the school? Are those taxes going directly to our school system to offset the problems?
A big chunk of them will. On the wholesale tax, we get taxed 15%. It's called an excise tax on our cultivation. It's in addition to the sales taxes that are collected per sale. And the first $40 million of that tax annually will be dedicated to schools. So we're going to see a lot of that money funneling in for additional education. Plus, the tax revenues are ramping up law enforcement. They're paying for police officers' salaries.
That's coming out of that same tax?
Out of the sales tax that's collected, yes. So the governor hasn't defined exactly where all of the monies are going, but $40 million is slided right off the top to go to schools.
40 million out of how many?
Every year. So, well, that's the first 40 million from the excise tax.
40 million out of how much?
How much tax?
Revenue.
Well, we don't know yet. It's still the first year. So we're collecting, millions of dollars monthly in sales tax revenues, in addition to the excise tax revenues, in addition to the licensing fees. So there's a whole bunch of money available, and I really think it's going to be, we're going to have to force the legislatures to appropriate it correctly, but they're allotting millions and millions of dollars to cannabis impact studies throughout the state as well. The federal government is looking hard at those studies, so we're going to see a lot more money going towards identifying the impacts to not only the students but society.
Another question. Yeah. You have the percentage
of how much money is going to the schools?
40%, 50%, 60% out of the revenue that's supposed to be received?
Well, we can certainly find out for you. For sure. I don't have that specifically right now. I do not.
Well, what I'm asking is, have they designated a percent?
No, nothing specific. Just I know that the first 40 million from the excise tax is going to the schools. But I also know Higginlooper had just slated 10 million for additional research as far as impact studies with the legalization of cannabis. So we're going to see a lot more studies done in Colorado over the next year or two than we've seen throughout the federal government in our lifetime.
Well, it's not so much studies. I mean, it's money to address the problem, period.
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to see that not only from the tax standpoint, but from the industry as a standpoint. The industry's committed to help with that as well.
Kayla, do you want to speak to that before we wrap up also from?
I guess I don't really have a lot to add to that other than I have already been approached by people locally here within the industry to ask how they can donate money and towards our programs and those sorts of things, and it's shaky ground because we're working to prevent use of those substances with our teenagers, so it's all new territory that we're exploring in terms of how that works. So at this point we're feeling more confident in potentially using some of those tax dollars from the state because it's disseminated through grant programs with which we're already working, so it's there.
So, but you say you take the tax money, but not the money that is offered to you directly that comes from the same source as ours?
We're not sure yet.
Okay.
Let's take one last question, Miranda.
Okay. So, when she asked about what kind of solutions there are, you guys said like education and law enforcement presence. But if those are strategies we have been using, and the survey shows there's been an increase in the use of cannabis and alcohol in underage people, why would it be any different, so to say? I mean, what's going to change about it that's going to make people stop when it's increasing and we're already doing it?
You're a smart young man.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe we think of presence and amount of education and appropriateness of education towards it. Like, do you guys feel like what do you feel like you've been receiving? Do you feel like it's enough? Do you feel like it's the right kind of education? I guess would be my question back. How do we need to change it or shift it or?
Well, I've only been to the class you offered at HEA one time, but well, because I already have my health credit.
Sure.
But,
fair enough.
Most of the time, I feel like it's kind of too sugar. Like a lot of times, it doesn't feel like, at least with teenagers, it doesn't feel like you're speaking to us like young adults. It sounds like the same stuff I heard in middle school, the same stuff I heard in elementary school. You know what I'm saying? And like, I know there's more information out there, and like just by sugarcoating it, it seems like you're kind of holding back something. Like,
come to our class more often.
Yeah.
That would be my response back to it, but absolutely.
That's the experience I've always had with.
No, I hear what you're saying. I agree that things tend to be sugar-coated, and we've been working really hard to not do that. Our programs are all education-based, not sugar-coated. It's what you guys make of it too.
Excuse me, but didn't you mention earlier addressing the emotional and well-being of the person rather than, see, to me, we need to address the root,
yes,
the root of the problem, which is the well-being of that person rather than a bunch of statistics.
Absolutely.
So we need to address the root.
That's what we do.
But just how long is it in health now? The kids getting any marijuana education?
I'm gonna, that's a great question, and it's more complex than we probably have time to answer because it does vary by school and district. So I just want to thank you all very, very much for making time to be here tonight. Clearly your engagement shows us that there's a lot more conversations to have, and so one of the things, we don't want this to end tonight. It can't. It absolutely can't in our community for gathering solutions and coming together. So one, please take time, I know some of you already are, to fill out that evaluation sheet. Let us know what we need to do beyond tonight, how you're willing to be involved, and stick around and ask other questions and talk to us directly. And thank you so much to our panelists for excellent perspective and your time. There's also a basket outside, and don't forget the resource table. And again, thank you for your time and commitment.
Well, I have to do a little presentation.